Today we're going to look at Magha Nakshatra. Magha occupies the first degree of Leo and is the 10th nakshatra in the Vedic zodiac. Its principal star is Regulus, one of the brightest stars in the sky, historically known as the royal star and the heart of the lion. The royal quality is central to everything Magha governs. This is one of the more positive nakshatras in the Vedic system. It does not carry the shadow of Ashlesha or the dissolution of Mola. Its energy is regal, generous, and oriented towards honoring what has come before. Magha has three core themes: royalty and noble bearing, ancestry and lineage, and gifts that are freely given. All three flow directly from its symbol and its presiding deity. Magha's symbol is a royal throne room. The throne room is a place of ceremony, diplomacy, and tact, a space reserved for those of the highest rank and for matters of genuine consequence. It evokes splendor, nobility, and important endeavors. It is also a place of ambition. The throne room is where power is exercised, and Magha carries within it a certain restlessness that arises from personal ambition. The presiding deities are the Pitris, the ancestors of one's family. In traditional Hindu families, the Pitris are regularly worshipped and honored. They represent the generation that came before, the shoulders on which the current generation stands. In the natural, biological, and spiritual impulse of one generation passing something precious to the next, they gave life without expectation of return. It's also worth noting that the classical texts are specific about which planets thrive here. The royal planets, the Sun and Mars, do well in Magha. The servant planets, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, are very obstructed here. The throne room does not suit those whose nature is to serve rather than to reign. The three themes worth understanding in Magha are as follows. The first is royalty and noble bearing. When the ascendant or moon falls in Magha, the classical texts indicate a regal manner, a natural dignity and authority that others respond to. There is also a weakness for the opposite sex, which is consistent with the court and throne room environments of intrigue and attraction. The second theme is ancestry and lineage. Magha is deeply connected to what has been passed down, to old families, patrician traditions, and the study of origins. This extends beyond personal ancestry to civilizational lineage, the traditions, institutions, and accumulated wisdom of previous generations. Historians, archaeologists, and those who maintain and study lineages all fall under this nakshatra. The second theme is ancestry and lineage. Magha is deeply connected to what has been passed down, like in old families, patrician traditions, and the study of origins. This extends beyond personal ancestry to civilizational lineage, the traditions, institutions, and accumulated wisdom of previous generations. Historians, archaeologists, and those who maintain and study lineages all fall under this nakshatra. The third theme is gifts freely given. The Pitris gave life without expectation of return, and Magha carries that quality into the native's life. The house in which Magha falls, or the planet that occupies it, often indicates where gifts and opportunities will flow abundantly and generously. For example, when Magha falls in the 10th house of career, Career opportunities tend to be bountiful. This is one of Magha's most positive qualities, a genuine abundance that flows without conditions attached. When the ascendant falls in Magha, the themes of royalty, ancestry, and generous giving tend to show up clearly in the person's public identity and life's work. We start by looking at Ingrid Bergman, who had Magha rising, and she represents the pure regal bearing theme most directly. She was widely regarded as one of the most naturally aristocratic presences in the history of cinema, an elegance and dignity that required no effort and could not be manufactured. She also carried a certain moral authority in her personal life, navigating considerable public controversy with a self possession that was very characteristic of Magha's natural nobility. Next, we look at Maya Angelou, who also had Magha rising, and she is one of the most complete expressions of this nakshatra's ancestral theme in modern literature. Her work is fundamentally around lineage, about what the African American people carried through generations of suffering and what was passed down despite everything that was done to prevent it. She bore witness to that inheritance with a dignity and authority that was itself deeply regal. She carried herself with a natural nobility that was widely remarked upon. She was someone who commanded a room simply by entering it. And her gift to literature and to her people was freely given. She wrote and spoke not for personal gain, but because she understood herself to be a vessel for something that needed to be transmitted to the next generation. That is the Pitris operating through a human life. The last one is that of Paramahamsa Yogananda, who had both Magha rising as well as his moon in Magha, making him one of the purest expressions of this nakshatra's energy in the examples that we're going to talk about today. He represents a different dimension of Magha's royalty, not political or artistic eminence, but spiritual authority of the highest order. He carried himself with a natural dignity that his students describe as genuinely regal. He was also deeply connected to lineage, to the ancient tradition of Kriya Yoga that had been passed down through a line of masters, each giving freely to the next generation without expectation of return. His own mission was to give that tradition to the West, an act of ancestral transmission across cultures that is entirely consistent with the Pitri's freely given gift. His autobiography of a yogi remains one of the most widely read spiritual books in history, a gift that continues to be given long after his death. The moon in Magha shapes the inner mind and emotional nature. Here, Magha's themes show up in what the person feels called to honor, protect, and give. Winston Churchill had his moon in Magha, and he illustrates both the royalty and lineage themes with equal force. His public bearing was undoubtedly regal, a man who commanded rooms, parliaments, and nations through sheer force of presence and authority. But what is perhaps less often noted is that Churchill was also a serious historian. He wrote a multi volume history of the English speaking people, a biography of his ancestor, the Duke of Marlborough, and a history of the Second World War that won him the Nobel Prize in Literature. He understood himself explicitly as a custodian of British civilizational tradition, as someone standing on the shoulders of previous generations and responsible for passing that inheritance forward. That is Magha's ancestral theme expressed at the scale of an entire civilization. Jayalalitha had a moon in Magha, and she is one of the most striking examples of this nakshatra's royal theme in Indian political history. She began as a film actress and became the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, one of India's most populous states, serving multiple terms over 3 decades. She was known to her followers as Amma or Mother, a title that carries within it both the regal and the ancestral qualities of Magha. She commanded a devotion from her supporters that bordered on worship, and she gave back to them with extraordinary generosity, subsidizing food, housing, and essential goods in ways that were explicitly unconditional. That pattern of receiving devotion and giving freely in return is a very specific expression of the Pitris gift and Magha's generous quality. Lastly, we look at Dolly Parton, who also had Moon in Magha, and she is the most unexpected and, in some ways, the most instructive example in all the examples that we looked at today. Her entire artistic identity is rooted in the Appalachian traditions, family stories, and musical heritage of her ancestors. She has never moved away from those roots, even as she achieved global fame. That loyalty to lineage and tradition is deeply characteristic of Magha. But what makes her a particularly clear Magha example is the Imagination Library, her program that has donated over 200 million books to children worldwide, entirely free of charge, with no expectation of return. That is the Pitri's gift in its most literal and generous modern form. She receives nothing back from those children. She gives because giving is what Magha does. The careers and places associated with Magha follow directly from its themes. In public life and government, people like heads of state, senior government employees, and those involved in big concerns and companies. In law, lawyers, judges, and high courts. And in the preservation of tradition and lineage, people like historians, archaeologists, birth registry officials, and those associated with well established universities, societies, and clubs. The common thread across all of these is eminence and institutional weight. Magha is not the nakshatra of the newcomer or the disruptor. It is the nakshatra of those who operate within established structures of authority and honor what those structures represent. To summarize what we have covered today, Magha is the nakshatra of the royal throne room, presided over by the Pitris, the ancestors who gave freely to the generations that followed. Its principal star is Regulus, the royal star. Its three core themes are royalty and noble pairing, ancestry and lineage, and gifts freely given without expectation of return. Magha is one of the more generous nakshatras in the zodiac. It asks those born under its influence to honor what came before them, to carry it forward with dignity, and to give freely from whatever they have been given.